Welcome back to 12 Unsolved, Illinois. In part 1, we walk through 6 haunting cases, from Chicago's shadowed corners to lonely farmland, where answers slip through the cracks of time. Now we journey deeper into the heart of Illinois, into stories where the darkness grows thicker and the silence louder. These are cases where the clues are faint, suspects elusive, and the truth is still hiding just out of reach. Welcome back to the Agatha May Detective Agency. I'm Agatha May, and I'm so glad you're here. If you'd like to be notified when I upload a new episode, make sure you hit the subscribe button and choose all for the notifications. We're starting this episode of 12 Unsolved in Calhoun County, Illinois, with a case that happened during the Great Flood of '93. In June of 1993, the Great Flood was swallowing towns all along the Mississippi, cutting off roads, isolating homes, and turning backcountry routes into muddy mazes. In a remote stretch of northern Calhoun County, 4 or 5 miles west of the tiny village of Campsville, Stuart Tony Craig Miles was at home. By the evening of June 30th, he would be dead. His wife is the one who found him around 5:30 p.m. inside their house, with a single gunshot wound to his head. Tony was only 27 years old. He had served as a Calhoun County Sheriff's deputy before taking a job with the Illinois Department of Corrections, where he was working at the time of his death. Because of the flood, the only way to reach Tony's house was through the winding, nearly impassable back roads, which might have made it easier for someone to slip in and then slip out. The sheriff's office built a large case file and brought in the Illinois State Police to assist them with the investigation. Over the years, they've chased tips and sifted through theories, but in 3 decades, there have been no arrests and no named suspects. If you have any information about Tony's case, please contact the Calhoun County Sheriff's Department at 618-576-2417. 18-year-old Shanna Jaros was just starting her life. She'd moved into her very first apartment, ready to carve out her own space in the quiet town of Nokomis, Illinois. But on Halloween night in 1995, that sense of independence and her life were brutally taken from her. Shanna had invited a few friends over for a small Halloween party. Around 9:30, her father stopped by with one of Shanna's younger brothers to let him do a little trick-or-treating. Everything seemed perfectly normal, so he left, and the party continued until a little after midnight. A neighbor later reported hearing a faint scuffling sound in Shanna's apartment around 4:45 a.m., but nothing that set off alarm bells. Everything was quiet after that. At 6:50 that morning, Shanna's landlady, who lived next door, noticed that the door to Shanna's apartment was ajar. She called out, expecting maybe a forgotten lock or an early riser, but no one answered. When she peeked inside, she saw Shanna's body on the floor, partially hidden beneath a quilt. She immediately ran to call the police. Shanna had been stabbed more than 50 times in the chest and neck, and her throat was cut. Coroners placed her time of death around 4 a.m., just before that neighbor heard the muffled commotion. Investigators collected over 200 pieces of evidence, hoping the sheer volume would lead them to answers. But no one was ever arrested in Shanna's death. Decades later, her murder is still unsolved. If you have any information about the 1995 murder of Shanna Jaros, please contact the Illinois State Police Zone 6 Investigations at 217-324-2515. It was a quiet evening in Gifford, Illinois on May 26, 1997, when 19-year-old Heather Zimmerman stepped out of her family's home. She grabbed a soda from the fridge, said little to her parents, and left the house around 8:30 that night. It's been reported that she had attended a party in rural Rantoul that night. Heather never returned home. There were reports that she might have been dropped off near her family's home at 3 a.m. the following morning, but no one could verify the claim, and Heather was never seen again. She had left behind all of her personal belongings. Her purse had been stolen prior to that night, leaving her without cash, identification, or credit cards. Even her last paycheck at Casey's General Store, where she worked part-time, remained uncollected. Neighbors, friends, and authorities combed the surrounding rural roads, fields, and wooded areas, but the search produced nothing. There was no trace of Heather. If you have any information on the disappearance of Heather, please contact the Champaign County Sheriff's Office at 217-384-1213. On the night of Saturday, April 25th, 1998, 20-year-old Jeremy Chappie Chapelier headed out to a party at an old farmhouse in Montgomery County, Illinois. Jeremy was last seen at the party around 2 a.m. By sunrise, the night had turned grim. A fisherman driving toward Coffeen Lake came across Jeremy's body on Buckeye Trail, about 2.5 miles outside of Donaldson. He'd been struck by a vehicle and then was left to die alone in the dark. Some believe Jeremy had decided to make the long 10-mile walk home when the party ended. For more than 2 decades, the question has lingered. Who was behind the wheel that night? Someone knows. Maybe the driver, or maybe the person they confessed to in a late-night conversation that still haunts them. If you have any information about Jeremy's death, please contact the Illinois State Police Crash Reconstruction Unit at 618-542-1116. And to add to our list of cases where the victim was at a party, it was a Friday night, March 9th, 2007, when 20-year-old Jamie Harper left her mother's home in Paxton, Illinois. She told her family she was heading to a party in Rantoul, a house on the 1300 block of Laurel Drive. She wasn't alone when she left, a male friend was with her. But sometime in the early morning hours of March 10th, everything changed. Jamie was last seen around 4:30 a.m. She had left the party alone and was planning to stay the night at a friend's house. But she never made it to the friend's house, and she didn't go back home. An anonymous tip came in claiming that Jamie had overdosed and that her body had been dumped in an area of Paxton that the locals call Dogtown. Investigators searched, but there was no trace of Jamie, and the tip was never verified. Police have a person of interest in her disappearance, and it's someone who is also connected to the case of Heather Zimmerman, but they've never released a name. If you have any information about the disappearance of Jamie, please contact the Paxton Police Department at 217-379-4315. On November 17, 2016, 13-year-old Robert Bonsai B. Jr. disappeared after what seemed like a minor act of rebellion. He had skipped school, and then when a truancy officer came to take him to school, he ran from his home in Pekin, Illinois. That was the last confirmed sighting of Bonsai. His mother, Lisa, reported him missing the following day. He was listed as an endangered runaway, so no Amber Alert was issued, since it was believed he had left willingly. Local volunteers rallied as Team Bonsai, joined by the Missouri-based group Trucks for Kids, scouring fields, woods, and every lead that came in. Then, nearly 9 months later, on July 24, 2017, someone mowing grass on a rural property along Route 29 just south of Pekin discovered scattered skeletal remains in the yard and nearby wooded area. Within 48 hours, dental records were matched to Bonsai, and DNA evidence later confirmed that it was him. On October 10, 2017, the Tazewell County coroner ruled the boy's death a homicide, though no cause was publicly released. Police agencies, including the Pekin Police Department, the Tazewell County Sheriff's Office, and the Illinois State Police, are still treating Bonsai's death as a criminal investigation. The chief of police insists they followed thousands of tips and won't let the case go. But in the absence of answers, hope for Bonsai's murderer facing justice is fading. Theories have surfaced, including one that Bonsai might have been with older teens before he vanished, but no suspects have been named. If you have any information about Bonsai's case, please contact the Illinois State Police, Zone 4, at 217-782-0000. 4750. 6 lives ended or interrupted, leaving family and loved ones left with more questions than answers. In our next episode of 12 Unsolved, we'll head east to Indiana, where we'll look at the first 6 of 12 cases from the Hoosier State. Thank you so much for joining me for another episode of 12 Unsolved. I'll be back soon with more true crime. Until next time, stay safe and be happy.